Alex had always been a cautious person when it came to online dating. He had heard the stories, the horror tales that others had experienced. But as the years passed, loneliness grew heavier on his shoulders. At 27, he was still single, spending most of his evenings scrolling through dating apps, swiping left and right with the occasional optimistic swipe right. None of it felt real. None of it felt connected. That was until he downloaded Relate Me. The app promised an innovative algorithm, one that would match people based on deep psychological compatibility. There were no vague profiles, no superficial pictures, and no swiping on mere appearances. This app focused on finding true connections through an in-depth personality questionnaire. It seemed like the perfect solution for someone like Alex, who wanted something genuine. The first evening after downloading the app, he sat in his apartment, scrolling through the potential matches, his fingers moving rapidly over his phone's screen. It was late, too late, and the coldness of the night made his apartment feel empty, despite the warm glow of his desk lamp. He was about to put his phone down when a notification popped up, a new message. "Hey Alex, I've been waiting for you." It wasn't just the words, but the timing that unsettled him. The message was from a girl named Lena, someone he hadn't matched with yet. Her profile picture was minimal, a shadowy image of her standing on a balcony, the city lights in the background, her face half obscured. Her eyes, though, stood out, intense, dark, almost pleading. He didn't know what possessed him to reply, but he did. "Sorry, I don't think we've matched yet. Are you sure it's me you're looking for?" The message lingered for a moment. Then another reply popped up. "I'm sure. I've been watching you." Alex's heart skipped a beat. His mind raced. What did she mean by that? Was this some kind of prank or a bot? His thumb hovered over the screen, unsure whether to block her or to keep engaging. Before he could make a decision, a follow-up message came through. "Don't worry, I just need your help. I'm in trouble, and I need someone to trust. Can you do that for me?" A shiver ran down his spine, but there was something about her words that he couldn't ignore. Was it the vulnerability in her tone? The fact that she had reached out to him specifically? Against his better judgment, he replied, "Trouble? What kind of trouble?" She answered almost immediately. "It's hard to explain, but I'm being watched by someone or something, and I need to get away from them." The hair on the back of his neck stood up. This sounded like the kind of story someone tells when they've watched one too many conspiracy theory videos. Yet, despite the logical part of his brain telling him to walk away, Alex found himself intrigued. "I don't know what's going on, but where are you right now?" he typed. She responded quickly. "I'm in San Francisco. Can you meet me?" Alex paused. He was in Los Angeles, a good 6-hour drive away. Something about her message seemed off, but at the same time, her desperation pulled at him. The thought of someone in genuine danger, the possibility of helping her, was compelling. He told himself it was just a conversation, just a weird app interaction. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was at play. "I'll be there," Alex typed, and after a deep breath, he hit send. The drive up the coast was long. It was a Friday night, and the highway stretched endlessly before him, illuminated only by his headlights and the occasional flicker of a passing car. The farther he drove, the more uneasy he became. It wasn't just the distance. It wasn't even Lena's strange messages. It was something deeper, a sensation he couldn't quite place. The eerie quiet of the night made his thoughts swirl, growing heavier with every passing mile. By the time he arrived in San Francisco, it was almost midnight. He parked in front of the apartment building Lena had mentioned in her messages. the city lights casting an eerie glow over the pavement. He had half expected her to have texted him by now, giving him a more precise location or more details, but nothing had come. He pulled up her profile one more time. It was still the same, a blurred photo, a vague bio. His stomach twisted. It seemed like the further he dug, the less he knew. A part of him wondered if this was a bad idea. Another part of him felt like it was too late to back out. As he stood there, staring at the building, his phone buzzed in his hand. "I'm in the alley behind the building. Please hurry," Lena's message read. Alex glanced around, trying to shake the feeling that he was being watched. With no time to waste, he walked toward the alley, his heart pounding in his chest. The darkness around him seemed to grow thicker with every step he took, his footsteps echoing off the walls. When he turned the corner, Lena was standing there, her back against the wall. She was even more striking in person, her dark eyes wide with fear, her pale face gaunt under the flickering streetlights. She was trembling, and Alex could see that her hands were shaking as she pulled her coat tighter around her. "Lena," Alex called out, his voice barely audible in the silence. She looked up at him, her expression a mixture of relief and fear. "Thank you for coming. You don't understand. They're after me. I need to get out of here." "Who's after you?" Alex asked, stepping closer. Her eyes darted around nervously, as if she feared someone might be listening. "I don't know how to explain it. They've been following me for weeks. They know everything about me, and Suddenly, the sound of footsteps interrupted her. Alex froze. Someone, or something, was coming. Alex's pulse quickened as Lena's voice trailed off, her eyes wide with panic. The footsteps grew louder, and the shadows seemed to stretch farther into the alley, as if the night itself were swallowing them whole. Lena pulled him closer to her, her grip tight, as though he was her only lifeline. "They can't know we're here," she whispered. "They can't know." Alex looked around frantically. The alley was narrow, dark, and seemed entirely abandoned, yet the feeling of being watched only intensified with each passing second. The footsteps echoed, growing nearer, but the source remained unseen. "Who are they?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lena took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling in frantic bursts. She was on the edge, but she had to speak. She had to say something. "They're part of something bigger," she said, her voice trembling. "It's a cult. They use the app to find people like me. People who are vulnerable, I guess. They watch us. They know everything." Alex's mind raced. A cult. Was this some kind of twisted prank? He had been skeptical of online dating apps in the past, but this was something else entirely. Something darker. "I don't understand," he said, trying to make sense of it. "How does the app play into this?" Lena swallowed hard, her eyes darting nervously around. "It's not just about dating. They've been using it to track people down, to manipulate them. They know your deepest fears, your weaknesses. They prey on it, and they know exactly how to use it to control you." Alex's mind reeled. The app was supposed to help people find meaningful connections, not put them in danger. But Lena's words painted a different picture, one of sinister manipulation and dark forces at work behind the scenes. He shook his head, trying to push past the disbelief. "But why you? Why me?" Lena's face twisted in anguish. I'm not just any girl. I'm part of a ritual, one that was supposed to happen, but I escaped, and now they're after me. And you too." Alex took a step back, his heart pounding. "What kind of ritual?" Lena's voice dropped to a near whisper. "It's a blood sacrifice. They need someone to die, and I was supposed to be that someone." A chill ran down Alex's spine. He stared at her, trying to make sense of her words. It was insane, unbelievable. was real. The desperation in her eyes was too raw to ignore. "They've been following me for weeks," Lena continued. "I've moved twice already, changed my phone number, deleted all my accounts, but they still find me. They know everything." Alex tried to steady his breathing. He wanted to tell her it was just paranoia, just some overblown fear. But there was something in her eyes, something he couldn't deny. Before he could speak, the footsteps drew closer. His heart skipped a beat as a dark figure emerged from the shadows. It was a man, tall and thin, with sharp, cold eyes. He moved with unnatural precision, like he knew exactly where they were. Lena's grip tightened on his arm. "We need to go. Now." Without waiting for a response, she started pulling him down the alley, but Alex hesitated. Something wasn't right. He turned around and looked at the figure. It was standing still now, watching them with an almost unnatural calm. "Lena," he whispered urgently. "Who is he?" She didn't answer. Instead, she yanked him forward, urging him to run faster. But the man didn't follow. He didn't have to. Alex's mind raced as they turned the corner and sprinted down the next alley. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being herded, forced into a direction that they couldn't escape from. The more they ran, the more they seemed to be drawing closer to something darker. Lena pulled out her phone, her hands trembling as she typed something quickly. "What are you doing?" Alex asked. "Sending a message. I need to warn someone who can help us." Alex looked over her shoulder, eyes scanning the darkness. "Help us? Who could help us now?" Lena didn't respond, but her fingers moved frantically on the screen. Alex had the sudden urge to take the phone from her and see who she was contacting. But before he could act on it, the phone buzzed in her hand. She froze. Lena's eyes widened. "It's them." A cold shiver ran down Alex's spine. He had been trying to tell himself this was all just a misunderstanding, a bad coincidence. But now, with Lena standing frozen in fear, his doubts were gone. Something far more sinister was at play here. Without warning, the phone slipped from Lena's hand, clattering to the ground. A soft crack echoed in the air as it hit the pavement. Alex bent down to grab it, but as he did, something heavy crashed into his side. He was knocked to the ground, pain shooting through his ribs as he fell. Lena screamed. A dark shape loomed over him, blocking out the dim light of the street lamps. Alex's vision blurred as he struggled to push himself up. He looked up, eyes wide with terror, and saw the man standing over him. The last thing Alex saw before everything went black was Lena's terrified face, her mouth open in a silent scream. When Alex woke, the first thing he noticed was the silence. The kind of silence that felt oppressive, as if the world itself had stopped spinning. His head throbbed, and his chest felt heavy. He slowly opened his eyes, blinking against the harsh light of a single bulb above him. He was in an unfamiliar room. The walls were cracked, peeling paint chipping away in places. The floor was cold beneath him, and the smell of mildew filled the air. Lena was gone. Alex's head spun as he struggled to sit up, every muscle in his body aching from the fall. The pain in his chest was sharp, as though someone had driven a knife into his ribs. But that didn't matter. What mattered was Lena. Where had she gone? Why was he alone? He looked around the room, his heart hammering in his chest. The space was dark, cold, and bare. There was no sign of life, no sign of her. Just a rusted metal chair in the center of the room, and the eerie hum of fluorescent lights flickering above. It felt like he had been transported into some kind of nightmare. Panic surged through him as he tried to stand. His legs were unsteady, but he managed to stay upright, glancing frantically around. He spotted a door at the far end of the room, but before close in. The room felt smaller, suffocating. A feeling of dread washed over him, and his breath quickened. Suddenly, a voice echoed in the silence. "Don't bother." Alex froze. The voice came from behind him, cold and calm, like a whisper in his ear. His heart raced as he turned to face the source. A figure stood in the corner of the room, partially hidden in the shadows. A tall man, his face obscured by a hood, his posture stiff and imposing. "You're not going anywhere," the figure continued, his voice low and controlled. "You've already made a mistake by coming here. Now it's too late." Alex's mind raced, his breath shallow. The fear was overwhelming, but something inside him pushed him to fight back. He wasn't going to let this person, this thing, control him. He had to find Lena. He had to escape. "Where is she?" Alex demanded, his voice hoarse. "What did you do to her?" The figure didn't respond right away. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate step forward, his movements unnervingly calm. The light caught his features, and Alex could see the cold, unfeeling eyes staring back at him. "She's not your concern," the figure finally said. "You're here because you were chosen. You're here because you're part of something bigger than you can understand. And now, you're part of us." Alex's stomach turned as he tried to make sense of the words. Chosen. Part of something bigger. This was insane. None of this made any sense. Chosen for what? Alex's voice trembled, his mind spinning in confusion and fear. The figure stepped closer, a slow, mocking smile crossing his lips. "For the ritual, the one that's been set in motion, the one that you and Lena are a part of. All the pieces are in place now. There's no going back." The word ritual hit Alex like a punch to the gut. He thought of Lena, her panic, her fear, the look in her eyes when she had spoken of the cult, of the blood sacrifice. This wasn't just some paranoid delusion. It was real. And now, he was in the middle of it. "I won't let you do this," Alex spat, trying to steady himself. He felt a surge of adrenaline, a desperate need to fight back, to escape. But the figure didn't flinch. He didn't seem bothered by Alex's words at all. "You don't have a choice," the man said, his voice colder now. "This is bigger than both of you. The app, the connection, it was all part of our plan. We've been watching you for a long time. Watching you both. It's only a matter of time before you're reborn." Alex's stomach churned as the realization hit him like a wave. The app, the strange connection with Lena. It wasn't just a coincidence. They had been targeted from the beginning. But why? Why him? And why Lena? "Why her?" Alex asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "Why did you choose her? Why me?" The figure's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. Lena was always the key. She's the one who was meant to be the sacrifice. You, on the other hand, were just convenient. The connection was too strong to ignore. It made it easier for us to bring you here, to make sure everything went according to plan. Alex's mind spun as he tried to process the information. He wasn't just some random person who had stumbled into a dangerous situation. No, he was a part of it. He was part of the ritual. "You don't understand," the figure continued. "Once the ritual is complete, we will have control over everything. The app, the people, the power. It will all belong to us. And you will be reborn. Part of the New World Order." Alex's body trembled, not just from fear, but from the sheer terror of the situation. He had to get out of here. He had to save Lena. He had to stop this from happening, no matter the cost. Suddenly, the figure moved. With a speed that seemed unnatural, he crossed the room, blocking the door before Alex could even take a step. "You're not leaving," he said, his voice low and deadly. fear win. He had to think. He had to escape. He glanced around the room, his eyes landing on the rusted metal chair in the center. A plan began to form in his mind. If he could distract the figure long enough to get close to the chair, he might be able to. But before he could finish the thought, the door to the room slammed open and another figure stepped inside. Lena. Alex's breath caught in his throat. She was alive, but there was something different about her. Her eyes were dark, vacant, and her skin had a pale, almost unnatural hue. She stepped into the room with a slow, deliberate grace, her gaze fixed firmly on Alex. "Lena," he whispered, his voice breaking. She didn't respond. She just stared at him, her expression cold, empty. The figure in the corner smiled. "She's ready," he said. "It's time." Alex's heart sank as Lena moved toward him, her steps slow but purposeful. The terror in his chest grew, the air around him growing thicker, heavier. This wasn't just a ritual. It was a trap. Alex's heart hammered in his chest as Lena approached him, her movements eerily slow, like she was under some sort of spell. Her eyes, once full of life, were now hollow, vacant. The fear that had gripped Alex's heart only intensified as he watched her step closer, her lips curling into a thin, cold smile. "Lena," he whispered again, his voice breaking. "Please, stop. This isn't you. I know this isn't you." But there was no response. Her eyes, empty and lifeless, locked onto his, and Alex felt a cold shiver run down his spine. It was like she wasn't even hearing him, like she was no longer the person he had connected with through the app, the girl he had shared secrets with, laughed with, the girl he had tried so hard to protect. "Lena, you have to fight this," he pleaded, desperation creeping into his voice. The figure in the corner watched them with a dark satisfaction, his cold eyes gleaming. "It's too late for her. She's been chosen. She's ours now." Alex's stomach turned at the thought. This couldn't be happening. He had to do something. He had to snap Lena out of this trance, had to find a way to break whatever hold these people, these monsters, had over her. But how? His mind raced, and then he remembered. The application, the one they had used to meet. There had been something strange about it from the beginning, something about the way Lena had described it, something about the way it had connected them so effortlessly. Alex glanced at the door, wondering if he could make a run for it, but the figure blocked the exit, his posture rigid, unwavering. He wasn't going anywhere without a fight. "No one escapes," the figure said, his voice cold and certain. "Not once they've been marked." Mark. The word echoed in Alex's mind, and suddenly everything clicked. The application, the connections, the messages. Lena had said they were being watched. The cult had been using it to track people, to connect them with their chosen ones, to bring them into the fold. Alex wasn't just here by chance. He had been marked, and now so had Lena. She was no longer the person he had met. She was part of something bigger, something darker. And if he didn't act fast, he would be pulled into it too. "Lena," he cried out, his voice trembling with urgency. "You have to fight them. You're not one of them." For the briefest moment, there was a flicker in Lena's eyes, a flash of recognition, as if something deep inside her was stirring. But then, just as quickly, it was gone. The cold emptiness returned, and she took another step forward. "No," Alex whispered, backing away. He couldn't let her get any closer. He couldn't let them take her, couldn't let her become what they wanted her to be. But as he backed away, he stumbled over the rusted chair in the center of the room. It tipped over with a loud clang, sending a shock of noise through the silence. The figure in the corner didn't flinch. Instead, he took a step toward Alex, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can He turned around, blinking in disbelief. Standing in the doorway was someone he hadn't expected to see. Someone who seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. It was a woman, dressed in dark clothes, her face shadowed beneath a hood. Her presence felt strange, almost ethereal, like she didn't belong in this world at all. "Who are you?" Alex asked, his voice hoarse. "Not important," the woman replied, her tone sharp and urgent. "What matters is that you're still alive, and I'm here to help." The figure in the corner tensed at her words, his eyes flashing with anger. "No one helps him," he snarled. "He's already part of the plan." The woman's eyes locked onto him, her gaze piercing. "The plan is already falling apart. It's too late for your little ritual." The figure sneered, stepping forward. "You don't know what you're talking about. The ritual is complete. It's in motion." The woman stepped into the room, her presence like a wave of cold air washing over Alex. "Not yet," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You're not as invincible as you think." Before Alex could react, the woman raised her hand, and the air in the room seemed to change. It was as if a heavy fog had suddenly rolled in, thick and suffocating. The figure in the corner staggered back, as though the air had become too dense for him to breathe. "What is this?" Alex gasped, feeling his head spin. The woman didn't answer. She moved toward Lena, who was still standing motionless, her vacant gaze fixed on Alex. With one swift motion, the woman reached out and placed a hand on Lena's forehead. There was a brief flash of light, a spark of energy that shot through the room like a bolt of lightning. For a moment, everything went quiet. Lena blinked, her eyes clearing for the first time in what felt like forever. She looked around, disoriented, as if she had just woken up from a long, terrible dream. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What's happening?" "Lena," Alex said, rushing toward her. "You're awake. You're okay." The figure, still in the corner, let out a guttural growl. This isn't possible." But it was too late. The woman's presence had shattered the hold they had over Lena. And now, the ritual was no longer in motion. Alex didn't waste any more time. He grabbed Lena's hand, pulling her toward the door. "Run," he said, his voice urgent. "We're getting out of here." As they ran, the woman's voice echoed behind them. "Don't stop. They'll be back. They won't give up that easily." But Alex didn't look back. The only thing that mattered now was getting Lena to safety. Whatever it took. Alex's breath came in shallow gasps as he and Lena sprinted through the darkened hallways of the abandoned building. The woman who had helped them, her name still unknown to him, was right behind them, her footsteps light but purposeful. Her presence had given Alex a sliver of hope, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were still being hunted, that they weren't safe. Not yet. As they turned a corner, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway behind them. It was like the entire building was alive, closing in on them, the walls shifting and warping with every step they took. Alex glanced over his shoulder, but he couldn't see who was chasing them. All he knew was that whoever it was wasn't going to let them escape. "We need to move faster," the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They'll catch up soon. They're never far behind." "Who are they?" Lena asked, her voice shaking with fear. She was still disoriented, but the haze in her eyes was starting to clear. She was starting to wake up, but the horrors they'd just escaped were still fresh in her mind. "They're the ones who've been controlling you," Alex said, glancing over at her. "And me. They've been using the app to track us, to bring us into this ritual." Lena's eyes widened in horror. "Ritual," she repeated, her voice trembling. "What are you talking about? I don't remember any ritual." "They've been using us," Alex said, his voice tight with frustration. The app, the connection, it wasn't just a coincidence. They planned this. They wanted us to be a part of whatever they're doing. The woman beside them said nothing, her eyes scanning the hallway ahead. She seemed to be lost in thought, like she was waiting for something. Her calm demeanor unsettled Alex. How could she be so composed in the middle of all this chaos? "We have to keep moving," the woman said finally. "There's a way out, but it's not going to be easy. They'll do anything to stop you from getting away." Alex nodded, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed by something more than just the cult members. It was like the very walls of the building were closing in on them, like the air itself was thick with malice. Something was wrong. Something was watching them. Suddenly, a door at the end of the hallway burst open. Alex's heart stopped as he saw a group of figures emerge from the darkness, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. They were dressed in the same hooded robes Alex had seen on the figure earlier, the ones who had been part of the cult. "There's no way out," one of them hissed, stepping forward with a cruel smile. "You think you can run from us? You're already ours." The woman beside Alex and Lena raised her hand, and a surge of energy filled the air. The figures hesitated, their expressions flickering with confusion for a split second. It was all the time Alex needed. He grabbed Lena's hand, pulling her toward the nearest doorway, a small room to the left. "We're not letting them take us," he said, his voice low but determined. They dashed into the room, and the woman followed, slamming the door shut behind them. The room was dimly lit, with only a few flickering lights overhead. It was empty, except for the strange symbols etched into the walls. Symbols that seemed to pulse and shimmer with an eerie glow. "What is this place?" Lena asked, her voice trembling. "What are those symbols?" "They're part of the ritual," the woman said quietly. "They're used to keep people like you trapped. They're meant to control you, to bind you to their will." Alex felt a cold sweat break out on the back of his neck. The walls of the room seemed to shift, as if the symbols were alive. The air was thick with a strange energy, and Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, monitored somehow. "We need to break the connection," the woman continued. "That's the only way to stop them." "How do we do that?" Alex asked, his mind racing. "How do we break free?" The woman looked at him, her eyes dark and intense. "You have to destroy the source, the application. That's where they've been tracking you. That's how they've been pulling you into their world." Alex's stomach sank. The application. He had never fully understood how it worked, but he had suspected it was more than just a dating platform. "The app?" Lena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How can we destroy it?" The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped toward the wall, her fingers tracing the symbols that glowed with an unnatural light. The air grew colder, the hum of energy intensifying. "There's only one way to do it," she said finally. "You have to confront the leader, the one who started this whole thing. He's the key. Once you defeat him, the connection will be broken." "Where is he?" Alex demanded. "How do we find him?" The woman turned to face them, her eyes shadowed with something darker, something Alex couldn't quite understand. "He's coming for you, and when he does, you'll have to make a choice. Do you fight, or do you give in?" Alex felt the weight of her words sink in. There was no escaping this. No matter where they went, no matter what they did, they would always be hunted. The only way to stop it was to confront the source, to face the person who had put them in this nightmare. And Alex knew, deep down, that he wasn't just fighting for his own survival anymore. He was fighting for Lena, for her freedom, for both of their lives. Suddenly, the door burst open, and the figures from before stormed into the room, their eyes glowing with an unsettling light. "You can't escape," one of them snarled. tension, and Alex could feel the ground beneath him shift, as though reality itself was beginning to warp. Every step they took forward was a step closer to the endgame, his final choice. "You can't win," one of the figures sneered. "You don't understand the power we wield. You'll never be able to stop this." The woman stepped forward, her gaze unwavering, her face hardened with determination. "I've seen what happens when people like you get too comfortable, when you think you can control everything. But this time, it's different. This time, you're not in control." The figure laughed darkly, its voice an unsettling mix of menace and amusement. "You've no idea what you're dealing with. The ritual is already in motion. It's too late to stop it now." Alex clenched his fists, the weight of their words pressing down on him. He had heard it all before, but he refused to believe it. They had taken everything from him and Lena. He couldn't let them win now. He wasn't going to lose her. The woman's eyes flickered to him. "Alex, you have to stay focused. Don't let them confuse you. They're trying to break your resolve." Suddenly, the lights flickered. The walls seemed to close in around them, and the symbols on the walls pulsed with an eerie glow. The figures stepped closer, their hands reaching toward Alex and Lena, their movements slow but purposeful. A voice echoed in the room, deeper and more powerful than the others. "Enough!" The figure at the front of the group stepped forward, revealing his face. It was a face Alex recognized, though he had never seen it before. His eyes were cold, calculating, a deep, unsettling darkness that seemed to pierce through everything. He was the leader, the one who had been orchestrating everything. "You," Alex said, his voice tight with disbelief. "You've been controlling us all this time." The leader smiled, a cruel, predatory grin. "I didn't just control you. I shaped you. I molded you into exactly what I needed." "You're insane," Lena spat, her voice trembling with fury. "You think you can just play with people's lives like this? Destroy everything just to get your way?" The leader's smile never wavered. "It's not about destruction, my dear. It's about control, power, and soon you'll understand that." Alex's pulse quickened, his mind racing. He had to do something. They couldn't just stand here and let this man, this monster, win. "You're not going to get away with this," Alex said through gritted teeth. "Not while we're still breathing." The leader's eyes glinted with amusement. "You think you can stop me? You've already lost. You're already part of this world. There's no going back." "You're wrong," the woman said sharply, stepping between Alex and the leader. "This ends tonight." The room was silent for a moment, the only sound the steady pulse of the symbols on the walls. Then, with a swift motion, the leader raised his hand, and the air grew cold. A rush of energy surged through the room, like a powerful wave crashing against them. Alex felt his body tense, every muscle screaming in protest, as the energy tried to pull him into the very ground beneath him. It was as if the floor had turned to quicksand, dragging him deeper and deeper into darkness. But he refused to give in. "Lena," he shouted, reaching out for her. She was struggling too, her face pale and contorted with pain as the energy from the leader's power threatened to overpower her. But she wasn't alone. The woman stepped forward, her hands raised, a shield of light forming around them. It wasn't enough to stop the leader's power completely, but it created a barrier that allowed Alex and Lena to fight back. "Lena," Alex said, his voice strained but firm, "we have to break the connection. We have to destroy the app, the one that's been controlling us." Lena nodded, her face set in determination. "How?" Alex's mind raced. There has to be a way to access the app's core, to destroy the signal. The leader, he's the key. If we stop him, we stop everything. The woman's eyes glinted with understanding. "The leader holds the control, yes, But it's not just the app, it's his bloodline. He is the source. What do we do? Alex asked, desperation creeping into his voice. The woman looked at him, her gaze hard. You confront him, destroy his power, and everything connected to it will unravel. The leader laughed again, this time louder, mocking them. You think you can just destroy me? I am the foundation of everything. You're nothing but pawns in my game. Alex's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. This was the moment where everything would be decided. With one last surge of energy, Alex threw himself forward, grabbing the leader by the throat. The leader's eyes widened in shock, his grip faltering as Alex's hands tightened around his neck. But the leader wasn't done. He pulled out a strange, jagged object, and with a quick motion, slashed at Alex's arm. Pain erupted in Alex's body, and he staggered back, falling to the floor. Blood spilled from the wound, but he couldn't stop. Not now. Lena screamed, rushing to his side, but Alex forced himself to stand. He couldn't give up. Not now. Finish it. The woman's voice rang out, urgent and sharp. Now. With one final desperate push, Alex lunged toward the leader, using the last of his strength to break the hold the leader had on the ritual. He grabbed the leader's wrist, twisted, and the app, its presence, its grip on everything, began to crack, like glass shattering under pressure. For a moment, everything was still. The symbols on the walls faded, the energy in the room collapsed, and the weight that had been bearing down on them for so long vanished. The leader's body crumpled to the floor, his face frozen in disbelief. Alex and Lena stood together, breathless and battered, but free. They had done it. They had destroyed the source. As the last of the energy faded, the woman stepped back, nodding at them. It's over. You're free. Alex turned to Lena, his eyes softening as he reached for her hand. We made it. We're free. Lena smiled, tears in her eyes. We're free. And as the dust settled